now open for public comment, will require crypto asset service providers to identify their users and report those transactions. Ivadne Bronkhorst is a senior manager for tax consulting at Forvis Mazars, joins us for that conversation. Then our market commentary covered by Stembile Bopela, the F&B Wealth and Investment Analyst. Now, Friday File, looking at a bit of luxury every Friday, some lifestyle here on The Money Show. A luxurious Norwegian cruise liner cruise through the Greek Isles and Turkey. We'll find out where your money will get you and what you can exactly experience with Iga Motulska, who is the freelance travel writer and guidebook author. Then we'll be looking at the B20 recommendations on how to finance trade and agriculture on the continent. That with Abri Rotenbach, Deputy Co-Chair of the B20 South Africa Sustainable Food System Task Force. But before that, your Eyewitness News.
Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau has again met with U.S. trade officials amid continued efforts to strike a sweet trade deal with Washington. Tau met with U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamson Greer and members of Congress this week, following intensive 3-day discussions by senior officials. South Africa has been trying to secure lower tariffs on exports to the U.S. after President Donald Trump imposed higher duties in August. Nokukanyo Ntambo has that story.
A revised trade offer was tabled to the U.S. in August, with some concessions by South Africa to address Washington's calls to balance trade. At the time, Pretoria said it wouldn't compromise on its domestic and foreign policy to appease Washington, adding the country would only negotiate on economic matters. Only parts of the deal being negotiated were made public, with a $3.3 billion investment tag into U.S. industries such as mining and metals recycling. Trade and Industry spokesperson Camille Ali.
Both parties agreed to a roadmap that will inform future engagements towards the conclusion of the process.
Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau is expected to brief President Cyril Ramaphosa on the talks soon. Nokukhanya Mtambo, Eyewitness News.
Moving our focus to the Matlanga Commission now, where KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi rejected claims that he violated protocol by wearing special task force uniform during his explosive media briefing on the 6th of July. It was at that briefing that Mkhwanazi blew the lid on acts of political interference in the criminal justice system and police corruption. Mkhwanazi was criticised by some politicians for wearing the military-like uniform while flanked by several armed officers, but he says there's no merit.
There are many people that call themselves experts that blame me for having breached the protocol. Perhaps they will come before this commission and say this is a protocol of police that Mkhwanazi broke on the 6th of July. Because if that was the case and it's brought to my attention, I'll be the first one to admit that yes, indeed, I broke protocol. But I would have believed that action will already be taken against me for having broken protocol.
Mkhwanazi has justified his decision.
We wanted to communicate a message to South Africa that we are ready and communicate a message to this drug squad, politicians, the executive, police officers within law enforcement agencies that we're ready for them. Maybe you'll forgive me in saying this as a Zulu man. I
don't sneak up on a person. I face them directly.
For updates on the Commission, visit ewn.co.za or watch proceedings on our YouTube channel. The Municipal Workers Union is threatening to make Gauteng ungovernable during the G20 summit if some of its demands are not met. SAMWU has today expressed its unhappiness with the Tshwane Council voting to increase the salaries of councillors by 5% while worker wages remain stagnant. The union wants councillor increases reversed, as Tabiso Goba explains.
For the first time ever, the G20 summit is being held on the African continent in South Africa. The event will see heads of states, foreign ministers and many other experts from across the world gather in the country for talks about global economics. Johannesburg has been chosen as a host city. However, the metro cities of Tshwane and Ekurhuleni will also host ancillary G20 events. SAMWU's regional chairperson Lihlohonolo Maphatso says those who have been working hard to ensure the metros are ready for the event are not being appreciated.
If they do not reverse the 5% salary increase that they resolved upon in the presence of the provincial chair, there will be no G20 in Gauteng. We'll mobilize more than 50,000 members of SAMWU in Tshwane. Actually, we are working on a build-up program to ensure that Gauteng will be ungovernable. There will be no G20 here in Gauteng.
The two-day G20 summit is scheduled for the 22nd and 23rd of November this year. Thabiso Kuba, Eyewitness News.
Staying in Gauteng, the city of Tshwane says its teams are continuing with repair work following a power outage that plunged the Pretoria CBD and surrounding areas into darkness. Yesterday, the utility's electrical infrastructure was stolen and vandalized, causing extensive disruption to the electrical supply, affecting businesses and homes in the area. Metro spokesperson Lindela Mashiko says they cannot confirm when power will be restored and has pleaded that residents be patient.
The damage, which occurred yesterday, led to a power outage affecting the Pretoria CBD, Khosi Mampuru, the second correctional center, Pretoria West Industrial, and nearby communities. The city is pleased to report that materials have already arrived on site and preparatory work is underway.
Gold is trading at $3,671.94 an ounce. The rand is at 17.34 to the dollar, 23.37 to the pound, 20.36 to the euro, and Brent crude currently at $66.76 a barrel.
In your sport, the latest from the second ODI between the Proteas women and Pakistan. Kaizer Chiefs break their silence on Nazruddin Nabi's position, and Asanat Ntlabaganye to start for the Lions in the Currie Cup final against the Griquas.
A partly cloudy Saturday in store for Gauteng with isolated showers and thunder showers. Joburg drops to an overnight low of 9 and reaching 29. Pretoria 14 up to 30. Vereeniging 5 reaching a high of 29. Cape Town can expect partly cloudy conditions, a low of 12 and a high of 20. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour, Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau has again met with US officials amid continued efforts to strike a trade deal.
EWN, in touch, in tune and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app. EWN Traffic.
Edenvale, we still have bumper-to-bumper traffic heading into Bedfordview. There's the R24 westbound between Edenvale Road and the Kilulis interchange still in the Edenvale area. This is in Eliondale. There's slow-moving traffic on Modderfontein Road between Greenstone and Zierfontein Road in the city of Tshwane. Expect some delays. This is on the N1 northbound approaching the R21 Flying Saucer interchange, while in the mother city leaving the CBD. There's slow-moving traffic on Nelson Mandela Boulevard. This is approaching Browning Road. Also, bumper-to-bumper traffic N2 outbound between Bunga Avenue and Airport Approach. If you come across any other traffic issues, kindly WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
And now, The Money Show with Moteo Paripe
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply. Welcome to the Friday edition of The Money Show. Lots to look at this evening, starting, of course, with the B20 conversation. We're about 63 days away from the G20 meeting, and there have been a lot of meetings from different sectors of society, business, looking at the different solutions that can be looked at, especially for the continent. Tonight we talk about the financing of trade and agriculture on the continent, discussing that with Abri Rautenbach, Deputy Co-Chair of the B20 South Africa Sustainable Food Systems Task Force, but also Executive for Agribusiness at ABSA Group. Then our Money Show explainer tonight, talking about how the taxman really misses nothing. SARS tightening crypto tax reporting, the new crypto asset reporting framework now open for public comment, will require crypto asset service providers to identify their users and report transactions. So no more shady or cloak and dagger transactions in that part of the world. Evadne Bronkhorst is a senior manager for tax consulting at Forvis Mazars, will join us for that conversation. Then a late market resurgence from the JSE, especially pushed up by mining shares. Stembile Bopela of FNB Wealth and Investment Analyst will tell us more about that. It's Friday, and on Friday on The Money Show, we have a bit of lifestyle and fun. Tonight we're talking about sailing in style, a luxurious Norwegian cruise liner, a cruise that will be going through the Greek Isles and Turkey. We'll tell you about the beauty and how you can get yourself there with Iga Motilska, who is a freelance travel writer and guidebook author. Then later on, of course, the bragging rights in our Friday Biz Blitz. Do join us for that. But for now, let's chat money.
The Money Show
with Moteo Khwaripe
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
So 1 in 10 people globally face hunger, with food prices placing significant strain on household budgets. Farmers are very under pressure, growing pressure on them to increase the yields amidst very, very tough economies and costs, volatile weather that we're seeing, declining access to arable land as well. Very, very tough conditions to operate in order to supply not only just the continent, but the rest of the world with food. So what can be done in terms of changing this around? Is it a financing issue, a policy action issue, or just political will? Let's now chat to Abri Rautenbach, the Deputy Co-Chair of the B20 South Africa Sustainable Food Systems Task Force, but also Executive of Agribusiness at ABSA Group. Abri, welcome to The Money Show.
Good evening, Mokeo, and thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Let's look at just the recommendations that have been put forward for the G20 meeting. In terms of financing trade and agriculture, what have been the key points that have been put on the table?
Yeah, okay. So I think, before I get to the recommendations, I'm quickly just going to stop, and some of the trends, because I think, the recommendations is based on some of the analysis of trends that was done. So I think, in your intro, you spoke around, climate shocks that cost Africa $8.5 billion in 2022, and for developed countries that could increase to $600 billion by 2030. Then we also looked at the global supply chains, and that has driven food insecurity up by 150%. And I think if you just think more recently in South Africa, foot and mouth disease, there's a bit of panic buying, and that all plays, on the supply and demand. And then, we've got this growing population, international population, and by 2050, we would need 40% more cereals than what we're currently producing, just to maintain where we are. And then, it is this pressure on land and resources. And Africa is in a very good position because we've got, of the 80 million arable land that's needed, to fill this gap, we've got about 70% of that in Africa. But out of that, we then moved into, the recommendations. And it's really around how do you strengthen and increase the resilience of these supply chains, for specifically local, but also for regional trade. And then another recommendation was, access to productivity, boosting inputs and technologies. Once again, if you just think of biotechnology, seed manipulation, where it's drought resistant and disease resistant, that's extremely important. And then, we looked at inclusive livelihoods, and specifically looking at females and youth, which are predominantly, found in agriculture outside of South Africa's borders as well. And we've got in Africa this young population coming up. And then, it was all around, food security strategies and how do you link trade, to that, whether it's intra or inter-regional trade, and making sure that markets, because once again, we've seen that a lot of food get, produced, but don't get to the market. So that's fairly important.
Abri, all of this needs money, right? And there's a lot of discussion around the financing in Africa, whether it's the cost of capital allocation coming into the continent, but also just how tough it is to raise money for some of these programs. When you look at the financiers for especially the agricultural sector, do we have enough on the continent to speak to some of these problems, or do we need to also shop around for more loans and money outside of the continent?
Yes, I think it is a collaboration. So it is this public, private, and philanthropic, money that's needed, and it's in a balance. And it's really around how do you use some of this technology to make financing models easier and better by using technology, because this cost to serve is a fairly expensive model. And if you just think of remote sensing satellite imagery, you are able to see historic production, but also real time, the ability to manage a crop in real time, for pest or disease or water issues or drought. So I think in Africa it is really a combination, so the philanthropic money are usually coming from the developing countries.
Yeah.
And we've seen in a country like Ivory Coast, in the cashew industry, where government partnered with multinational companies. They've built processing factories and facilities at the ports, and by doing that, they've created, I think there's 60,000 small-scale farmers that participate in that cashew value chain, and I think that's the success. It is really picking these value chains, making sure that the value chain de-risks some of these farmers by creating a market, and then combining typically something like blended finance, with a normal loan, and then be able to finance into this specific sector.
Before I let you go, just one question from me. The B20 recommendations obviously still need to be lobbied ahead of the meeting. Time is running out. We're about 63 days away from the meeting. If you were given one recommendation to be on that table for the delegates to see, which one would it be?
I think it will be value chains and collaboration in that value chains, and making sure that these public-private partnerships are built properly.
All right, that was Abri Rautenbach, Deputy Co-Chair of the B20 South Africa Sustainable Food System Task Force, Executive at Agribusiness for ABSA Group.
The Money Show Explainer.
Now, the taxman misses nothing, right? You never really get away with much. And this is new proof of this. The new crypto asset reporting framework, now open for public comment, will require crypto asset service providers to identify their users and report transactions about a certain threshold to the South African Revenue Service annually. This means any transactions that happen then when it comes to cryptocurrencies and trading there, whether it's the likes of Binance or anything that is traded on that particular market, would have to be recorded firstly, but also openly transcripted for SARS to see. We're going to be getting into our Money Show Explainer with Evadne Broncos, the Senior Manager for Tax Consulting at Forvis Mazars. Evadne, let's just look at what SARS is trying to do here. Yes, the technology of crypto has been fast and it's turned around the corner a few times, but it looks like the revenue collectors is now catching up.
Yes, I would definitely say that SARS is being a trendsetter in this regard, but it is also long overdue. So the publication of the draft regulations contains the crypto asset reporting framework as approved by the OECD committee. And the idea behind this reporting framework is to provide for the automatic exchange of tax-relevant information on crypto assets, thereby extending the tax net and also ensuring that crypto gains are appropriately taxed.
This will be good for South Africa's fiscus, obviously, but also I imagine good for crypto, because a lot of people, when it started out, were saying it's not regulated. We don't know who's who. We don't know where the money is going. But with more transparency, that could open it up to a more broader market.
Yes, I definitely think so, especially for investors that are more risk adverse and that are more familiar with traditional financial products like unit trusts or equity investments. And we all saw what happened when there was a lot of uncertainty regarding the change in the VAT rate. Uncertainty in tax policy it can be detrimental to the South African economy. And I think it's high time that there is some regulatory development in this regard. And I hope this is only the start of more regulatory certainty regarding crypto assets.
Will the Revenue Service be looking for exact numbers for every transaction, or maybe looking to look for transaction at over 10,000, 20,000 Rand, 100,000 Rand?
So there are certain thresholds that are prescribed. So the regulations are proposing to focus on specific crypto assets, specifically your cryptocurrency, and then also non-fungible tokens and fungible tokens, and then also focusing specifically on reportable persons, for which a tax residency must be verified. So from a SARS perspective, it will be persons that are tax resident in South Africa. And the threshold, if I recall, is somewhere, I think, above 50,000 USD or in the region of that amount. But there is a monetary threshold. But I think what we are moving towards is something similar to the traditional financial institutions, where they issue an IT3B certificate to a customer of the financial institution, and that information is then automatically populated in an income tax return of either an entity or then an individual. So I think that is what the intention behind these regulations are, to get more granular information, to ensure that all the information is available to SARS, because currently there's about an estimated 6 million of South Africans that have invested in crypto assets, but approximately only 500,000 of those 6 million are declaring their crypto gains and paying tax on it.
So a big pool then to look for in terms of taxing. But for those that trade in crypto and believed in crypto because it was independent from, let's call it, the current system, will not be too happy about this.
Yes, I agree. But I mean, from the start, the basic taxation principles remain altered. Yes, there was a lot of uncertainty about, exactly how this will be viewed by the revenue authorities. But it was never the intention that there should be any product on the market for which a special dispensation is not available to escape the tax net, because then this would not be equitable towards other investors, such as, for example, if you invest in equity shares. So the idea was never that there should be an asset class that would escape taxation. So, of course, there might be some unhappiness on the part of crypto asset holders, but it was inevitable that this is a global asset class, and it is something that is important, and it's no longer a fringe asset class. It is overtaking traditional financial products. So it was only a question of time that this became the focus of the Revenue Authority.
Just how much work goes into modeling taxation for a new investment industry, if you will, when you speak about crypto? Because SARS had to sit down, probably assess, the crypto industry, who's who, how many people are invested, how the money is moving before they could draft these regulations on the tax.
Yes, but I think what is in SARS's favor is the fact that the crypto asset service providers already have to collect a lot of information pursuant to the anti-money laundering and know your customer procedures. So a lot of the information is already available from that information collection processes. And I also think this has been probably a precursor to these regulations, because these regulations now focus on collecting more granular information, such as the tax residency status, and also the acquisition and disposal of crypto assets for fiat or for other against other crypto assets, and transfers and monetary transactions where goods and services are acquired. So I think it's building on previous regulations in that sense. So there's a lot of transactional data that should already be available on the crypto asset service providers' systems.
That is Evadne Broncos. Thank you so much for your time. She is the Senior Manager for Tax Consulting at Forbes Mazars, talking about SARS, now looking at new regulations on taxing cryptocurrency. The new crypto asset reporting framework will require crypto asset service providers to identify their users and report transactions.
The Money Show.
The markets.
It was a late resurgence from the mining sector that pushed up the JSE today, up 688 points, hitting that 106,000 point mark. Banking stocks were down 0.5%. Industrials also weakening this afternoon. But commodities pushed up the JSE today with the rand also looking quite strong against the dollar. Sitembi Lebopela joining us from FNB Wealth and Investments to kind of look at the week that was when it comes to the markets. A very strong end to a heavy data week, and also one that included some interest rate announcements.
Very good evening, Mateo, to you and the listeners at home or in traffic. But yeah, similar moves to what we saw on the JSE yesterday, a bit of a lull in midday, but a nice run in the afternoon. So the local market finished well in the black, the top 40 posting its 11th consecutive day of gains. So as you mentioned, quite a robust week, quite impressive gains on the equity markets thus far. It was a mixed bag today. Resources definitely, found their shine. Gold miners in particular, the likes of Harmony, DRD, Goldfields, respectively printing north of 6% returns on the day. Platinum's also firming up very well, while the diversified names not so much. So clearly commodity prices favoring some more than others there. The other major sectors, industrials and financials, finished in the red. Perhaps funds rotating out of SA names into the commodity exposed players to push, those gains that we saw. But also I think some profit taking after Naspers and Prosus gave a good bounce yesterday, while Investec led the banks into negative territory after their somewhat disappointing guidance. But a tough day for the sector in general in any case. I think investors are definitely digesting, central bank activity this week. We had back-to-back meetings, so a lot to take in.
When I look at the rand, I was quite nervous in the beginning of the week because there were those data sets that were coming out, the inflation number, the SARB deciding on interest rates, a lot of pressure in the US for the Fed there to cut interest rates, but unshaken, unmoved, still as cool as a cucumber, just as last week. The rand really holding its own.
Yeah, I think the rand has definitely been very resilient in spite of all the local and the international developments. But I think, the rand is still very much a commodity currency. So I think no surprises there in seeing, the rand remain quite robust against its major crosses.
We saw some reports from Investec saying they weren't in a good environment, especially in the UK. Interest rates being cut, also hitting their business as well. Is this a sort of lull that we're going to be seeing from, financial services providers?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've seen across the banks in general, and that's just the nature of banks and in terms of their interest income and the interest rate cycle. There's always going to be the relationship that when interest rates go down, they are generating less in terms of net interest margin. But yeah, Investec's results were broadly stable in line with, the prior period at the midpoint. So the numbers really were quite lackluster. I think they felt it beat consensus expectations. And so I think that was where some of that disappointment came from. But perhaps also just some profit taking. The share has had some a positive run over the past 6 months.
Yeah.
But operationally, the SA business continues to show strength, particularly the specialist banking segment that delivered solid profit growth, extending from the full year. And, sort of the quality of the credit book is still performing quite well. But as you mentioned, the UK business did show a bit of pressure, some mixed results there. Again, the Rathbone story contributing positively to their non-income sort of generation, but the specialist bank facing a tougher credit environment, definitely impacting their numbers there. But yeah, I think the full interim results will sort of give us more color in terms of the actual operational underlying story. But yeah, I think the numbers just failed to sort of meet what the market was looking for.
Thank you to Stembile Bophela, FNB Wealth and Investment Analyst. A thorough look at the markets, and that's your commentary. Time now is 6:30. Here are your headlines with Martin Slubbert.
Thanks, Matteo. Good evening. The Thabo Bester prison escape trial will not begin this year in the Free State High Court due to delays caused by the switching of legal representatives and matters running concurrently in other courts. Bester, his alleged accomplice, Dr. Nandipa Magudumana, and their 7 co-accused returned to the court in Bloemfontein for an update on readiness for trial. They were accused of planning and orchestrating Bester's alleged brazen escape from the Mangaung prison in May 2022, where he was serving a life sentence. Khomotso Modise has more.
One of the reasons the Thabo Bester prison trial has not kicked off 2.5 years since his rearrest is because of his frequent change of legal representatives. Today, Bester fired his recent attorneys and appointed his 5th legal team since his arrest in 2023. But it's Nandipa Magudumana's legal bid in the Constitutional Court, where she's challenging her extradition, that's keeping the trial from getting underway. Prosecutor Amanda Bester says this matter is only likely to begin next year.
We're supposed to start on the 10th of November. My thinking is that the last day of that term, maybe we must take that again for another case management hearing and see what is going to happen.
Bester and his co-accused will return to court on the 5th of December for an update on Magudumana's Constitutional Court bid and the readiness for trial. Khomotso Modise, Eyewitness News at the Free State High Court.
Moving our focus to the Matlanga Commission now, and at least 18 criminal cases against alleged underworld kingpin Vusimusi Kat Matlala were mysteriously withdrawn in the past. KZN top cop Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi disclosed this during his testimony at the Matlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria today. Matlala is a key figure in Mkhwanazi's allegations of criminal infiltration of the South African Police Service. He is currently detained at the Kgosi Mampuru Correctional Facility in Pretoria for the attempted murder of his actress ex-girlfriend Tebogo Tobejane. Mkhwanazi maintains that Matlala wielded significant influence within the criminal justice system.
Because the threat, the enemy that we saw that is infiltrating crime intelligence, is infiltrating parliament, and is controlling our executive authority and going into the heart of the police operations, which is investigation. To date, I'm speaking to you, the Matlalas and the likes, if you go and see the record of cases withdrawn against Matlala, more than 18 here in this province.
Mkhwanazi says Matlala's influence in law enforcement agencies should not be taken lightly.
You can no longer wear a tie and face this fight. So this is a fight that requires, for one, to apply the tactics that is learned over years. And one had to draw on experience ahead in the task force of saying, how to deal with a terrorist? Because as I see it now, I think this is terrorism. This is people who want to take over government, not through the ballot paper, but through these criminal activities.
Mkhwanazi has concluded his testimony at the Commission and will be called back at a later stage. And the inquiry is set to resume proceedings on Monday morning. And for updates on the Commission, visit ewn.co.za or you can watch proceedings on our YouTube channel. The alleged gang boss Nafis Modak has been handed a 10-year prison sentence for corruption. 3 years of the sentence are suspended for a period of 5 years, which means he will effectively serve 7 years direct imprisonment. Modak was convicted in June for his involvement in criminal activities with former senior police officer Brigadier Kalindran Govender, who has since pleaded guilty and has been sentenced. Carlo Peterson has that story.
Hawk spokesperson Siyabulela Vukubi says investigation showed Modak acted with common purpose by paying gratification amounting to 146,000 rand to Govender in return for special treatment.
Govender prevented a cooperation between an officer from SAPS PAL Vehicle Identification Section and the investigating officer in a matter based at Cape Town Central. As a result of Govender's action, the Mercedes-Benz which belonged to Modak was never seized as it was the center of investigation.
Govender received a 5-year sentence, suspended for 4 4.5 years after pleading guilty to being in a corrupt relationship with Modak. Carlo Peterson, Eyewitness News.
And motorists leaving the Cape Town CBD on Sunday will not be able to use the elevated freeway. The road between Walter Sisulu and the N1 and N2 split will be closed to traffic. The City of Cape Town says its teams will carry out maintenance on the electronic message boards that are used to update motorists on traffic alerts. MACO member for Urban Mobility, Rob Quintus, says motorists will have to use alternative routes to leave the city.
On Sunday, the 21st of September, the outbound elevated freeway between Walter Sisulu and the N1-N2 split will be closed from 4 a.m. until midday for essential maintenance on the electronic message boards. Part of Herencross Street and FW de Klerk Boulevard will also be affected.
A partly cloudy day for Gauteng tomorrow with isolated showers and thunder showers. Joburg will drop to an overnight low of 9 and a peak of 29 tomorrow. Pretoria 14 up to 30. Vereniging 5 up to 29. Cape Town can expect a partly cloudy day with a light westerly breeze, a low of 12 and a high of 20. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour, the Thabo Bester prison escape trial will not begin this year in the Free State High Court.
EWN Traffic.
In Klipwoki, Boksburg, there's bumper-to-bumper traffic. This is approaching the intersection of Rondebolt and North Rand Road, North Boundary Road. There's also slow-moving traffic. Still, if you're heading into Soweto on the N12 westbound, this is approaching the M1 Uncle Charlie's interchange. Also, bumper-to-bumper traffic in Protea Glen. This is on the N12 westbound between the R554 Abu Bakr Drive and the R558. In the mother city, leaving the CBD, expect delays on Nelson Mandela Boulevard. This is approaching Browning Road. There's also slow-moving traffic on the M5 southbound between Pinelands and Kenilworth. If you come across any other traffic issues, kindly WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
Beyond every boardroom is a story waiting to be written. A story of a business and its potential, of a community that thrives, a hospital that serves, and energy that powers millions of dreams. It's a story that only gets better with a partner that has the expertise and solutions to make it a reality. At ABSA CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us, because your story matters. ABSA, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
Saddle up for springtime success with Hollywood Bears. Experience the thrill of the turf and take a shot at a share of 100,000 Rand in cash and betting vouchers. All you have to do is bet 50 Rand or more on any horse racing meeting online or visit your nearest branch to enter. Spring into action and bet now for your shot at exciting rewards.
T's and C's apply. Hollywood Sportsbook is a licensed betting operator. No persons under the age of 18 years are permitted to gamble. Winners know when to stop. South African Responsible Gambling Foundation toll-free counseling line 0800 006 008 or WhatsApp help to 076 675 0710.
Beyond the roads they built, beyond the maps they drew, lies a place only the bold will know, where mountains rise like giants and rivers test your will. With a 2.4-liter turbo diesel and off-road capability, the GWM tank was born for this. Venture further in the Tank 300 from only $7,999 per month. Visit gwm.co.za for T's and C's and to book a test drive. GWM. Go with more. Brought to you by GWM Finance, a division of Westbank and authorized financial services and registered credit provider.
EWN Sport.
5 to the weekend. A lot of sporting action on the cards. Tolagele Mganga, of course, here to give us all the action. I haven't quite caught the Proteas women game. Are we doing well?
They're doing very well, Mateo. They posted 292 for 3 in their second ODI against Pakistan, which has been reduced to 46 overs per side. Tasman Brits top scored with an unbeaten 171, while Captain Lara Valpad also contributed a century. In response, the home side are currently 105 for the loss of 3 in the 21st over. They still need 208 runs for victory. Batting is Aman on 39 alongside Pervez on 3. Switching to football, where Orlando Pirates will take on Lioli in their first leg preliminary tie of the CAF Champions League, while Kaizer Chiefs are away to Cobbenspor in the Codfed Cup tomorrow. In the Betway Premiership, Mamelodi Sundowns will look to return to the top of the table with the win over Durban City. Gran Kekana has shared his thoughts on the opponents ahead of it.
There's going to be a lot of fight from Durban City. Coach Gavin's teams, all his teams, they fight until the last minute. You know, there's going to be a lot of aggression. But I think the boys will be mentally prepared. Luckily, it's our home game, you know, and we try to make our home a fortress. So it's going to be a nice game. We'd also like the supporters to come out in numbers with their families, with their kids, so it can be a family environment. I think we need that togetherness as Sundowns Football Club.
In the Premier League, 4 rivals go head-to-head this weekend as Arsenal host Manchester City on Sunday, while Chelsea will travel to United tomorrow. The Blues haven't won at Old Trafford since May 2013, and Enzo Maresca has discussed if now the time is right for them to end that drought.
I think it's always difficult to play United away, so I don't think that now is the right moment, or next year will be the right moment, or last year was the right moment. It's always difficult. I watch the games that they played this season. Some of the game is not a real result in terms of even City game. Until 1-0, 2-0 they were in the game, so it will be a tough game, no doubt.
Quinn Horn will captain the Lions for their Currie Cup final against the Griquas tomorrow, while Asanathi Ntlabakanye starts a tight head prop. Mzwakhe Nkosi insists he's not taking a risk by selecting Ntlabakanye after he was formally charged by the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport but not suspended.
In the interim, he's a contracted rugby player for the Lions, so he must play up until his hearing in December. Importantly, though, we've had a chat to him. It's taken him a couple of weeks to sort of come to terms and put together his own case that he's going to present. But emotionally, I think he's comfortable. In fact, he's the vice captain for the weekend. On behalf of the chairman, the CEO, there's a lot of backing for him, and the cards will fall whichever way they fall, and we're really behind him. But he's trained with us for the last 2 weeks, so we look forward to him. And it's ripe for him to play now with the UFC tour in mind.
And Noah Lyles has matched Usain Bolt's record of 4 consecutive World 200-meter titles following victory at the World Championships in a time of 19.52 seconds. Rai Benjamin won the 400-meter hurdles. That's after officials overrode an initial disqualification for slightly dislodging a hurdle in the lane next to him when he knocked over his own. For Femke Bol, she defended her title in the women's race in a run of 51.54 seconds. Tholakele Mganga, Eyewitness News Sport.
Medical care, like music, needs continuity. A steady rhythm and pattern. Patients attended to on time. Medication taken as prescribed. Cut the rhythm and it falls apart. Right now, global funding cuts are restricting access to healthcare. With your support, Doctors Without Borders can continue to provide medical care to communities worldwide. Because medicine, like music, only works when uninterrupted. Doctors Without Borders. We go there.
When captains of industry gather to discover how AI and other exponential technologies can future-proof their organizations, they'll find out what matters most at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. Global thought leader Dr. Vivian Ming will challenge you on what it means to lead in an automated world by unlocking the full potential of human intelligence in the age of AI. Join her and other thought leaders by visiting spinstitute.co.za to book your seat at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. It will be on the 2nd of October at the Forum in Bryanston. Stellenbosch Business Institute, beyond a business school.
Small businesses are anything but small. They're the backbone of our communities, the dreamers, the doers, the ones who keep Mzansi moving forward. That's why 702 and Capitec Business Banking are putting them in the spotlight. Every Thursday between 6 and 8 p.m., catch Small Business Focus with Capitec, where we showcase the hustle, heart, and the secrets to thriving in today's economy. Your vision matters, and with Capitec, you're never building it alone. Small Business Focus with Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Thursdays between 6 and 8 p.m. on 702. Capitec Bank is an authorized FSP 46669.
The Money Show.
The Friday File.
The Friday File.
And the Friday File is all about lifestyle here on The Money Show on Fridays. Today we're talking about sailing in style. A luxurious Norwegian cruise liner cruise through the Greek Isles and Turkey. Doing that, we Iga Motilska, who is the freelance travel writer and guidebook author, will tell us about all the travels she's had over the past few weeks. I mean, Iga, you've had a very good time. It's around the summer months there in Turkey between June and September. So you probably had all the sun before we could experience it here back home. Just tell us about the cruise that you took and some of the places you got to see.
Good evening to you and your listeners. Yes, thank you so much. I must say, spending summertime in Europe was quite something. So I did an 8-day cruise around the Greek Isles and Turkey with Norwegian Cruise Line, that's NCL. And we started off in Athens. And of course, I feel that before you get going, it's always worthwhile to spend an extra day or two in the starting port just to see what it offers. So we went and explored obviously the Acropolis, all of the museums, the ruins, which was really something quite spectacular. And then before, once we'd visited all of that, we went and visited the islands of Santorini, Mykonos, and Rhodes during the cruise. So those were the 3 other islands that we ticked off. And then, of course, we visited Kuşadası and Istanbul for 2 days in Turkey as well. And it was my first time to Kuşadası and Istanbul. So that was really quite something. But I must say, it's everything that you imagine and dream of and so much more. It is, of course, particularly busy in the summertime, but you can also go during the shoulder season. And in Santorini, we saw those beautiful blue dome churches with those scenic cliffside villages. This is where we swam in the Aegean Sea. I brought along my snorkeling mask, and I must say it was much, much warmer than in Cape Town. And then afterwards in Mykonos, it's so well renowned for the iconic windmills, the whitewashed buildings, and the lovely beach clubs where the music is going. The cocktails are on tap and all of that. But I must say I thoroughly enjoyed Rhodes because we visited a very large medieval castle there.
Yeah.
And it really literally transports you back in time to an era of knights. And of course, in Kuşadası, it's a very famous port city. It's the gateway to these ancient ruins in Ephesus, which is a Roman settlement, which features in the Bible, actually. And it's said that this is where Saint Mary settled in the 1st century AD. So that was really quite something. And in Istanbul, of course, that's where the East meets the West. It's famed for Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, which was certainly my highlights. I indulged in Turkish delight and nougat. We drank pomegranate tea and strong Turkish coffee. And when you go and do a cruise of this sort, you can independently visit each of the port destinations, or if you like, you can also go and do a guided tour with an English guide who will give you those insights and all of that. So it really gives you, I guess, that flexibility to tailor your cruise along the Med or along Europe, however you like.
You had me at Beach Club, but I'm still wondering, as you hop on and off these cruise liners, the change in currencies and the exchange rate, how did that work out for you?
Yes, so, and I think this is something that's important to take note, is that you visit a number of different countries. And so very often it means that you are interacting with the locals if you want to go by yourself. Or what you do is, if you plan to do a guided tour that is organized by your cruise line, whichever cruise line you go with, you don't have to worry about any of that because everything is pre-planned. All your entrance tickets are bought, your transportation is sorted, you've obviously got an English speaking tour guide. So you literally, all you have to worry about is disembarking the vessel, being there, exploring the tour, taking it all in, taking all the photographs and the videos, asking all of the questions and just soaking it all in. And then obviously they drop you off at the vessel again. So you don't even have to worry about running late or getting lost or anything like that. So I must say, from a currency perspective, that was very simple. If you want to buy any kind of souvenirs, it's obviously very good to have some currency on you. You would obviously need to have the Turkish lira or the euro for all of the Greek Isles. However, I do also recommend getting a travel card. I think it's a really affordable way for South Africans to travel these days. Each of our banks offers one. You can preload your currency when the rand is at its strongest. You can have that on your card. You can use an an app or a virtual card or an actual physical card to tap as you go along as well. And so you don't necessarily have to worry about having any currency on you or anything like that. And if you know that you're traveling, you can always do the currency exchange beforehand and save a little bit on that as well. And you obviously don't have to worry about any kind of bank transfer fees as well or international charges if you're tapping your regular card. So it's much simpler and easier, I think, than most people expect.
Iga, what does this package cost us? What's the value of taking some of these cruise liners? Of course, if somebody's planning to go for the Europe summer next year, they can put a few rands away before they head there. So how much are we looking at?
Yes, that's always a very important question. I think before I get there, it's important to take note that there's something in the cruise lining industry that's called the wave season. And essentially, it's the industry's biggest promotional period. It runs from January to March, and it's their version of Black Friday. So during this time, international cruise lines, all sorts, offer some kind of a deal. It's very competitive. There are various incentives as well to encourage travelers to book their vacations for the upcoming sailing season and beyond. And so very often during the so-called wave season, you can get really cool perks like discounted fares. You might also get complimentary deals like onboard credits or a complimentary drinks package, free Wi-Fi, cabin upgrades, and so on. I know that various kinds of cruise lines, and particularly NCL, they very often have deals as well where the third and the fourth guest travels for free.
Oh, wow.
So if parents are
For
traveling
family.
children under the ages, yes, exactly. If parents are traveling with their children under the ages of 12, it makes it so much more affordable. And before we talk the numbers, there's something else as well. It's sometimes worthwhile going all inclusive because you'll also have additional deals that make it so much more affordable. So with NCL, for example, they've got the More at Sea package. And this includes unlimited open bar for all the alcoholic drinks, cocktails, beers, including premium brands.
Take my
You
money.
get 150. Yes, 150 minutes of high-speed Wi-Fi as well. And you get a $50 discount package per person on each of your port stops. So if you would like to choose to do an onshore excursion, if you prefer not to do it by yourself, then there's a really nice discount there as well. And this is a really great way to help you budget before you go on holiday. It also helps you avoid any kinds of costs. Like additional costs over and above that you might not have budgeted for. And I guess it also depends on what kind of traveler you are. So if you're a solo traveler, NCL has studio staterooms, and these are perfect if you don't want to have to pay a single supplement.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for the Greek Isles itinerary that I did, inside cabins start at about just under 39,000 Rand per person. The average balcony fare starts at about 62,000 Rand per person. And of course, there are those haven suites for people who really, truly love to travel in style. And those start from about 110,000 Rand. But I think it's important to keep note of what is included in a cruise. All of your accommodation is covered. And I think what's so convenient is you don't have to worry about catching transfers, inter-island ferries, or renting a car, or getting flights. You don't have to worry about booking accommodation and so on. All of that is included. All of your meals, of course, are included, as well as all non-alcoholic drinks. So that's like unlimited coffee, tea, water, iced tea, and juices. And of course, all of the activities. And maybe we can chat about the activities and facilities a little bit later.
And
But
unfortunately,
for families who are
Iga, we've
traveling,
run out of time. It seems like it's a long list of things you can get for just that all-inclusive price. Iga Motulska, freelance travel writer and guidebook author, telling us there about the luxurious Norwegian cruise liner cruise through Greek through the Greek Isles and Turkey. But of course, they have more than 700 destinations worldwide, 32 ships, approximately 66,000 berths that you can enjoy all around the world. If you want more information, of course, you can go to the NLC website.
702 and Cape Talk. Moteo is on The Money Show.
It is that time of the night, the Friday Biz Blitz, where we quiz you about all the things you've listened to here on The Money Show. Don't let that sting scare you. You can answer those questions by calling 011-883-0702, 021-446-0567 if you know the answer to this question. Aubrey Tau founded which DSTV channel owned by Siaya Media Network? Aubrey Tau founded which DSTV channel owned by Siaya Media Network? Of course, Aubrey Tau this week joining The Money Show as the shapeshifter. So which DSTV channel does he own? If you know the answer to that question, call us. Let's play.
Remember when everyone thought NFTs were the future of modern art? When non-fungible was a buzzword used in boardrooms to justify buying pixels, and the metaverse was just months away, and that we'll all be living in our virtual mansions, admiring our digital paintings, only to realize they were just expensive JPEGs. When you can't trust a trend, trust a 30-year track record of outperforming benchmarks.
Coronation. Trust is earned. Coronation is an authorized FSP.
You've reached in his Renault Duster en route to Dahlstrom. This journey is taking to try a sport far more boring than its name might suggest. Fly. Fishing. He'll be in his Renault Duster, which he bought with 40,000 Rand trade-in assistance.
Leave it all behind in the new Renault Duster with 40,000 Rand trade-in assistance. Offer exclusive to Renault Financial Services. Product of APSA. T's and C's apply.
The Johannesburg Philharmonic Orchestra presents its Symphonic Jazz Festival. Enjoy iconic South African jazz with full orchestra, big band, and rhythm section led by Marcus Wyatt. Featuring a stellar lineup of artists. Linda Auditorium on 24 September, 7:30 p.m. Tickets at Quicket.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by APSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. APSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
It is time for the Friday Biz Blitz. Of course, I asked you the question before the break. Aubrey Tau founded which DSTV channel owned by Siaya Media Network? A tough question, that. But another question you can consider: which financial news magazine will publish its final edition at the end of October? Which financial news magazine will publish its final edition at the end of October? If you know the answer, you can call us on 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. Which financial news magazine will publish its final edition at the end of October? Which financial news magazine will publish its financial edition at the final edition rather at the end of October? This, of course, speaking to print really going out of fashion. A lot of print publications moving now online as the market and the eyes move there. A great shift for journalism. But if you can tell us which financial news magazine will publish its final edition at the end of October? Masoga in Deep Kloof rather. Do you have the answer?
Yeah, I think it's Moja Life.
That is correct for the first question. Aubrey Tau founded which DSTV channel owned by Siaya Media Network? The correct answer is Moja Love. He was, of course, our shapeshifter. He's also the owner of Tau Foods. Then let me ask you the second question, Masoga. Which financial news magazine will publish its final edition at the end of October?
I think it's a Financial Mail.
You were close. The Financial Mail, one of South Africa's most respected weekly financial publications, definitely announcing that its final edition will be on the 30th of October. Let's see if you can get the third one now. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago changes the bank's benchmark repo rate to what? What announcement did the SARB make this week?
I think there's no changes. It's going to stay the same.
Definitely no changes. This is a man that was listening, Masoga, glued to his TV and radio. The SARB leaving the repo rate unchanged at 7% this particular week, and coming through there with some disappointment for a lot of households in South Africa. One last question for you, Masoga, there for the bragging rights. Tesla boss Elon Musk will receive a pay package of how much approved by the board? Tesla boss Elon Musk will receive a pay package of how much approved by the Tesla board?
Can you give me a clue?
if you convert it to rands, it's around 17 trillion rand. If you do your maths,
it's 1 trillion.
That's it. 1 trillion is the correct answer. All four correct for Masoga in Deep Glove, and he, of course, gets the bragging rights tonight in our Friday Biz Blitz.
This is EWN.
And good evening, I'm Martin Slabbert. Former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa allegedly forced former Inspector General of Intelligence Faith Radebe to withdraw the criminal case against Richard Mdluli. KZN top cop Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi made the allegation this afternoon as he concluded his testimony at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry after testifying for 3 days. Mdluli at the time was the head of crime intelligence and accused of abusing the police's secret slush fund between 2008 and 2012, which includes funding private trips and using police safe houses for personal use. Mkhwanazi, who was acting police commissioner at the time, attempted to forge ahead with prosecution against Mdluli, but claims he failed to do this due to political interference. Oren Singh with that story.
Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi alleges back in 2011, former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa interfered in the corruption case into former crime intelligence head Richard Mdluli. Mkhwanazi, who was acting National Commissioner at the time, alleges Mthethwa interfered by influencing former Inspector General of Intelligence, Advocate Faith Radebe, to withdraw a letter of prosecution against Mdluli. Mthethwa allegedly called Mkhwanazi into a meeting with Radebe, indicating they would not pursue charges against Mdluli.
If we talk about political interference, that was the worst I've ever experienced.
Mkhwanazi says what happened back in 2011 is still happening within crime intelligence today, and he had to speak out about it.
It cannot be that I allowed the Mdlula era, the Minister Mthethwa era, and under President Zuma to happen like that.
Mkhwanazi concluded his testimony at the Madlanga Commission and will be called back at a later stage. Oren Singh, Eyewitness News.
The Commission will resume proceedings on Monday morning, and for updates on the Commission, visit ewn.co.za or watch proceedings on our YouTube channel. There have been heated exchanges in Parliament between Johannesburg Mayor Dada Marero and the Water and Sanitation Committee, who have accused him of dodging key questions on solving the city's water crisis. In particular, the committee is not satisfied with his response on why Joburg Water is not adequately funded to deal with maintenance and infrastructure backlogs. Earlier this week, the Water and Sanitation Director General, Sean Phillips, told the committee that 4 billion rand of Joburg Water's budget had been taken back by the council. Lindsay Dendlinger with that story.
Johannesburg Mayor Dada Marero says the city has many competing demands and revenue generated from water sales can't all be passed on to Joburg Water. Marero says he hopes by June next year, water revenue can, with the blessing of the National Treasury, be ring-fenced for water provision.
This will be at the pace and scale that the city can afford, understanding that we need to do a balancing act in view of other needs or competing needs.
But committee chairperson Leon Besson was not buying Morero's reasoning, saying a council resolution could enforce a ring-fencing mechanism.
You are not serious about the problem of the water in Johannesburg. When are you going to ring-fence the money for water? That is what you need to answer me now.
The committee is also not satisfied with how the city intends to pay contractors who've halted water projects after Marero said the city is working well with him. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News.
To the Western Cape now, where protesting Overcome Heights residents from Muizenberg are calling for the Army's deployment to deal with violence in the area. This as several communities across the Cape, including Overcome Heights, continue facing a surge in gun and gang violence, with mass shootings reported in recent months. Acting Police Minister Firas Kachalia has admitted that police are playing catch-up in dealing with the scourge. Demonstrators have taken their plight to Parliament's doorstep today, with a group of women activists chaining themselves to the National Assembly's gates, refusing to leave until government officials address them. Today's demonstration coincides with a parliamentary debate on gun violence in the Cape. Karen Mentor says their voices are not being heard by the same people who are supposed to protect them.
You have promised that there is a safety plan, but we didn't see that safety plan because of what that minister is saying, that there is no plan, which they lie to the people. So they must tell us what their plans is for us.
And Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis is calling on signal jamming technology to be installed on cell phones being used by criminals that are incarcerated at Pollsmoor Prison in the Western Cape. Hill-Lewis says in addition to jamming signals and intercepting communications from underworld figures in prisons, raids should also be intensified. The mayor says he has written to the Correctional Services Minister Pieter Groenewald. He explains the extent at which criminal activities are being conducted from within the prison walls.
On a recent roads project inspection that I did in Bishop Lavis, I was informed by the contractor that he had left the site previously due to extortion threats made by phone call from an underworld figure currently serving time inside Pollsmoor.
To the markets now, where gold is trading at $3,667.96 an ounce. The rand is at 17.36 to the dollar, 23.39 to the pound, 20.39 to the euro, and Brent crude currently at $66.68 a barrel.
In Klippoki, Boksburg, there's still bumper-to-bumper traffic. This is approaching the intersection of Rondo Bold and North Boundary Road. Also in Protea Glen, traffic sluggish. This is on the N12 westbound between the R554 Abu Bakr Drive and the R558. And in the Mother City, traffic remains heavily congested. M5 southbound between Pinelands and Kenilworth.
A partly cloudy Saturday in store for Gauteng with isolated showers and thunder showers. Joburg 9 up to 29, Pretoria 14 up to 30, Vereniging 5 up to 29, and a partly cloudy day for Cape Town with a light westerly, a low of 12 and a high of 20. The top story this hour in Eyewitness News, the Mtlanga Commission of Inquiry heard today that former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa allegedly forced former Inspector General of Intelligence Faith Radebe to withdraw the criminal case against Richard Mdluli.
EWN, in touch, in tune and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
7:02.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
It's just after 7. Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show. This is a digest of just some of the best interviews from the show this week. If you'd like to hear more, you know what to do. Go to our website or your favorite podcast app and just search The Money Show. Listen, give us a rating, always a good one, 5-star here with us, or share with your colleagues and friends. Well, to start off with, here are some of the news stories that piqued our interest here on The Money Show from the week that was. The Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee, I wasn't too happy about this, voting to keep the repo rate unchanged at 7%. The prime lending rate remains at 10.5%. So very little relief for us as consumers and households. Then the Federal Reserve cutting U.S. interest rates for the first time this year, since December, in fact. So it was way, way before Donald Trump even became a president. Of course, the White House has been pushing for the U.S. Fed to cut more interest rates as U.S. job numbers go even lower. Earlier in the week, another data point coming out from South Africa. Status says annual consumer price inflation pulling back in August, easing to 3.3% from 3.5% in July. Thanks to softer food and fuel inflation taking some of the heat off the headline rate. I think the more or rather the less we have to pay for food, the better. And you know how I feel about that petrol price. Then tonight, we'll bring you a mix of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. Earlier in the week on personal finance, John Manyike, head of financial education at Old Mutual, joined us to delve into the significance of customary marriages within the South African heritage. He unpacked the financial and legal implications, shedding light on how these traditional unions impact everything from asset ownership to estate planning. Let's take a listen.
So look, I wish there was a very straightforward answer to that question. Is lobola alone enough, or does it constitute marriage enough? Because we also have to consider what the case law in the country means. But in principle, if you look at the law which governs customary marriage, which is Recognition of Customary Law Act, it does stipulate that a customary marriage must be, and basically it must meet three requirements. The first one is that the couple must both consent or have an intention to enter into a customary marriage. And secondly, they must be of age, at least 18 years and above. And lastly, that it must be negotiated and entered into in accordance with customary law. This is where the bone of contention is in most cases. That involves the testing of the legality of the lobola or the marriage itself. Now, in principle, one can easily argue and say, well, we have not celebrated. Yes, we paid lobola, but we have not celebrated. But we've seen over the years case law that says, well, at least some form of celebration should have
occurred. What constitutes a celebration in that particular point? Because when Mahadi's had the uncles at the gate, they come in with gifts and sometimes ivulamlo or more, a bit of money and a good bottle of whiskey. You know, festivities have started, basically. The lobolas then are put on the table. If the two parties agree, then they shake hands. The marriage is ongoing. Would there need to be ululations for the celebration, playing of music? What constitutes a celebration?
That's the thing, because the law does not explicitly give details, because of the lawmakers had to recognize the fact that in South Africa, we've got different cultures, we've got different ethnic groups. You know, even within one family, you can have a diversity of clans. There's certain practices that are observed in one clan and not the other. So they didn't want to get themselves too involved in the detail. Now, unfortunately, that has been left to the courts, where they hear arguments from parties that say, no, but you didn't, there was no ululation, the bride was not handed over officially. But then what I've picked up is that the courts have been more lenient, especially in favor of women, because they are the ones who are mostly disadvantaged, where men will live with a woman for 10 years and then come back later and say, no, but I want out, and then they want to go and marry someone. Now, the debates have to happen in court, where one party has to prove that, no, but we did conclude a customary marriage.
Yeah.
So I always advise people to consult the legal practitioners, but you need to err on the side of caution when it comes to trying to wage a debate that you're not married simply because your argument is that there was no handover. But remember the case of WHP that was in the news a couple of years ago?
Yes.
I think you'll recall that. One of the arguments was no marain, man. There was no handing over of the bride. But then the court would say, but hang on a sec, but were you not calling her Makot? In other words, you were behaving like a husband and wife. You're calling each other a wife. Why all of a sudden you say she's not your wife? But that's how you're addressing each other. That's how you're addressing yourself as Makoti, my wife, my husband. So obviously, anything that constitutes evidence, the court will be interested in hearing that.
During lobola, there are those books and notebooks that people keep record of what's happened, who was part of the lobola negotiations, what was decided, when is the marriage date going to be. Can those also be filed in court as evidence?
No, absolutely. Mateo, people would even go to as far as they're using their Instagram pictures to demonstrate that, well, this was a celebration. If this is not a celebration, tell us what it is. So all forms of possible evidence, can be presented before court. So it's too risky to go that way. This is why it's very important to register a customary marriage with Home Affairs, at least within 3 months from concluding the process, because then you eliminate all this drama.
And then here's a point I also want to get to. There's a lot of cohabitation in South Africa, aka fat and sit, right? How long would I have to stay with someone for that to turn into a marriage?
Well, at this point in time, one cannot argue that, by living with someone, it will not necessarily convert the status of that relationship into a marriage, regardless of how many years you've lived together. What does happen, though, is that it can pivot itself to what we call a universal partnership. A universal partnership where you've lived together for a reasonably long time, could be 6 months or more, and consistently, again, behaving like life partners, where you are exchanging or where you share responsibilities and so on. In the event that ultimately, at some point, that relationship dissolves, now, the question is that you've been accumulating assets over the period that you've been living together. How do you then split that? So in such cases where matters are debated in court, they will look at those things. I read one particular case law where the court went as far as saying, 30% of the man's assets should be liquidated in favor of the woman. So it's not a foregone conclusion. Just because it's not regarded as marriage doesn't mean there shouldn't be fairness in terms of how assets or even liabilities, for that matter, could be dealt with properly and in a just manner.
Let's get then into the marriage process. For instance, when I was getting married, I chatted to a lawyer friend of mine, and he was like, "Look, chap, before you go the lobola route, make sure you have the contract in place, whichever one you want to have for your union." And mine was out of community of property, right? And he was like, if you pay lobola before, then you automatically go into another regime that would leave you in a joint estate, which would be community of property. Can you just clarify the process there? What comes first?
Ideally, if you want to use the matrimonial property system of out of community of property, ideally you would want to conclude that process where you sign an antenuptial contract before the lobola negotiations. Even though one can argue and say that at a technical level, if you have not celebrated, but it's a long shot and a very risky one. Some lawyers would say, well, if you are in the process, because sometimes you find the couple is pressed for time because they want to conclude this, they don't want to be living together without being married, and because they want to observe other could be religious beliefs and things like that, and they want to respect their parents, they want to do that. In some instances, the lawyers will but say, okay, at least let's sign a letter that states that you have no intention of concluding a customary marriage. But then when you do that, you start meddling the waters, because, sometimes with these things, you can say you are aligned with your partner, but when things turn sour, your partner can show you flames.
So, look, hear me well, right? I'm not saying, John, that it's a trap, but hear me well. Once you get into community of property, right, what are the costs of trying to get out of the contract and starting over and maybe getting an ANC?
Well, if you've already concluded a marriage, and which amounts to in community of property because you didn't have a prenup, and all of a sudden there's change of circumstances, whatever the circumstances may be, you do have alternatives. One, of course, is to divorce and remarry. The other one is, of course, there is a legal process, which is quite tedious to actually change that. But because remember, also, your creditors need to be informed that this is what's going to happen, so that if if there are liabilities from parties, then they know how to deal with it. It's quite a tedious process, but it is certainly an option that exists for couples who want to do that.
So you need to pay lawyers to get out of that initial union you were in so that you can get into an antenuptial contract.
That's right. That's right.
Then let's look at the customary marriages then. It means you are in a joint estate, joint at the hip, and maybe also joint in terms of your accounts financially. Just explain the implications of that regime.
So if you're married in community or property, it means you have a joint estate. You have to share the assets and liabilities. Here we're talking about any assets or liabilities that you acquired before or during the marriage. You both share that. Of course, the couple will share the responsibility in terms of liabilities even during the marriage, where it doesn't matter who initiated the debts, because sometimes you find that somebody going to apply for a loan and whatever they state in their forms, because some of these in the case of customary marriages that are not registered with Home Affairs, there's no way that a bank or a financial institution will be aware that you are married, because there's no record of it. But that notwithstanding, if your partner goes and incur loans of 300,000 or so forth and so on, you are equally liable for that, because your partner would have signed.
Wow.
Same with businesses. I mean, you're in business, maybe your partner started a business, you've acquired the business, or you acquired the business during the marriage. It's considered to be a joint venture. Both spouses have an equal share in the business and will be entitled to an equal share of the profits or losses of that business.
Oh, losses, which is the major point.
Yes. And I'm glad you're highlighting that, because sometimes people get excited and say, I'm going to divorce, and then all of a sudden you realize your partner has ramped up this insurmountable debt, that if you want to divorce, then you realize that you're going to be owing millions. I mean, especially if they were in business.
That was John Manyike, who helped us unpack the cultural, financial and legal dimensions of customary marriages in South Africa.
One festival, endless flavor, and 2 unforgettable days of timeless music. The DSTV Delicious International Food and Music Festival, powered by Lotto Star, returns on 20 and 21 September at Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. On Saturday, the stage erupts with Don Toliver, Questa, and Nkabi Zezwe. Then on Sunday, experience the legendary Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Lyra, and more. The DSTV Delicious Festival, powered by Lotto Star. Tickets at Ticketmaster.
There's something magical about booking your next getaway. Whether you're flying for business or leisure, Airlink is ready to take you there in premium comfort. With over 45 destinations in 15 African countries, Airlink connects you throughout Southern Africa and beyond. No middle seats, just wider window or aisle seating. And yes, free luggage, snacks and beverages are still our thing. Plus, our Skybucks frequent flyer program rewards you every time you fly. Book on flyairlink.com or your travel agent. Fly Airlink, the freedom of the African sky.
All cars are designed to move. A Mazda is crafted to move you. Every line, every detail, form in motion, beauty with purpose. So that when you drive, you connect. Car and driver become one. One rhythm. Builds, holds, breaks free. The feeling will find you. Mazda. Wonder awaits.
Spar brings you super savings. Get 750 gram, 780 gram, 850 gram Nola mayonnaise, excluding squeeze bottle, for $38.99. Save 6 Rand with Spar Rewards, or 2-liter Spar full cream or low-fat ultra-pasteurized milk for $32.99 with Spar Rewards. Plus, you could win your share of 6 million Rand in instant cash. Price is valid until 22 September 2025. While stocks last, T's and C's apply.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
On our Business Unusual feature this week, Graham Cordrington, lead researcher at the Tomorrow Today Futures Institute, joined the conversation to unpack the University of Cape Town's groundbreaking decision to allow artificial intelligence in student assignments. The discussion explored whether this move marked the beginning of the end for traditional learning methods or represented a bold leap into the future of education.
I think this is a very interesting conversation, not just for universities, but also for any business that includes both professionals and people who are using their brain power, so-called knowledge workers. It's coming up to nearly 3 years anniversary since generative AI was introduced. And I actually think it's quite impressive that UCT is one of the first universities in the world to just say, you know what, if you're going to use generative AI, use it. But your question is quite right. I think I'm a bit older than you, Matteo, and anybody who's older than 50, maybe I can help you to not be that grumpy old person looking at today's young people strangely, because those of us who went to school in the 1980s, we will remember the introduction of calculators for the matric maths exam. And I was matriculated in 1988, and I remember that my grandfather, who was an inspector of education, thought that it was going to be the end of the world. He was one of those guys who could do amazing mental mathematics, and he thought that our generation of young people in the 1980s and 90s having calculators would mean that we wouldn't understand the basics of trigonometry and calculus, that we wouldn't know how to even do 2 + 2 in our heads. And maybe he was right. We've all got calculators on our computers, and I know that these days I check whether the tip I've added is correctly added up on the restaurant bill before I put the total. I check it on the calculator, not in my head. But what actually happened, Matteo, over the years is not what my grandfather was expecting. Instead of us dumbing everybody down, what's actually happened in the last 30 years or so is we've raised the base. So now the mathematics that young people are learning in matric today is probably similar to what my generation was learning in first year varsity. So calculators allowed us to not dumb down the clever kids, but actually raise the base of everybody else. And that meant we could teach higher level maths, and it did mean that the teachers had to change. And maybe that's the point of my story this evening, is that when you know that your students have access to a piece of technology that can give them some of the answers, you do have to change the questions, and you have to change the way that you question them. And I think that's what UCT are challenging their lecturers to do. And I think there will be a ripple into the professional world as well.
I mean, I remember exams where you were handed another extra piece of paper to try and work out the sums. Then we got to, maths higher grade, and then you were handed the calculator. Couldn't believe your life, but maths was still tough, even with the calculator in hand. Now, looking at, how education would be shaped going forward using generative AI, I think, is it a matter of people not understanding the technology and maybe trying to fend off something they don't understand instead of just welcoming it in terms of enhancing education going forward?
That's a great question, Matteo, and this is really why I thought this topic might be interesting for the Business Unusual slot this week, because contrast to UCT, just last week, I was with one of the big consulting companies, working with them and talking to them about AI. And they've got great AI tools that they've developed, and they're looking at agentic AI and all these good things into the future. But the one big question that didn't seem to have an answer was, how do we train the junior staff? Again, apologies, this is supposed to be a future-focused segment. I'm going into history this evening. But after school and studies, I went to KPMG, and I did articles at KPMG. And those first 2 years of articles, to be honest, for a guy who had a BCom and was kind of pretty smart, it really didn't feel like I was stretching myself, doing creditors recons and bank recons and stock counts and so on. But the point of those first 2 or 3 years in your profession, whether it's accounting or auditing or legal or engineering, the point of it is you learn the basics of your profession. You learn those building blocks that then help you to become that top quality professional later in your career. Now, what if we don't ever need a human being to do those basics? Because that's what these big consulting companies and legal and engineering and auditing companies are doing. They're saying whatever a first-year clerk or a second-year clerk used to do, we can get the machine to do that. And I think that's right. But here's where I think we've got to have a conversation. Is if you don't have the basic building blocks, if you've let a machine do your thinking for you, and then you hit something which is unusual or different or requires an application of skills, you might not have enough basic building blocks to be able to come up with a new idea. So that's a long way around to answer your excellent question, but I think we've got to still find a balance. Find a balance of using the new technology and tools that are available, but also realizing we can't outsource proper professional thinking to machines. And I'm not quite sure we know where the balance is between those two things at the moment.
I understand the scrapping of AI detectors, but I would be swayed to at least have university students show maybe their prompts, how they got to that idea, the brainstorming of the particular assignments that they need to complete as part of the attachments to the assignment, just to see how the AI is being used. I think it will be also a great help to see how, from a lecturer's point of view, how the students are still using the AI to think for themselves.
Yeah, and one final story from history. So when I was doing tax at WITS in the 1990s, we convinced our lecturers to make it an open book exam. And just like you experienced, Matteo, when you were handed the calculator, at first you think, oh, wow, this is amazing. I've got access to the Tax Act while I'm sitting in the exam. What you didn't realize is that your teachers were ahead of you. They raised the game, making the assignments and the questions harder. Because if you've got access to the underlying data or the underlying knowledge, the real question is, can you apply it? And that's, I think, the secret here, Matteo, is that in the university, we've got to change the questions we ask. We can't ask somebody to do a book summary anymore. We can't ask somebody to give us the 3 reasons that the Second World War started, because they can just ask ChatGPT to give them that answer. Now we need application. And that's what I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see better questions requiring deeper insight that can't be replicated by the machine. And in the professional world, I'm excited not to see the power of ChatGPT to replace anybody in businesses, but rather to augment their skills. For me, the best use of generative AI is to take somebody who is already good at what they do and give them a little bit of an extra edge. To go back to what I said about the calculator, we're not trying to dumb down the clever people. We're trying to raise the base for everybody so that everybody can be clever, and the really clever people can be even cleverer when they use technology in addition to their own brain. So for me, it's both and, rather either or.
That was Business Unusual with Graham Cordrington, reflecting on UCT's decision to embrace AI in academic work, whether it signals the decline of traditional learning or bold reimagining of education. One thing is clear: the future of learning is being rewritten in real time.
Escape the ordinary at De Hoek Country Hotel, Magaliesburg. A haven of tranquility and a 5-star masterpiece. Unparalleled luxury and the perfect getaway just an hour from Joburg and Pretoria. Bring your team for an executive corporate breakaway. Plan an unforgettable wedding surrounded by breathtaking beauty. Indulge in exquisite fine dining and rejuvenate mind and body at our spa. Visit dehoek.com to discover your exclusive escape. De Hook Country Hotel. Celebrate life where luxury meets serenity.
This is Jade. She'll spend hours comparing almond milk and once made a spreadsheet just for sneakers. But when she found Santam, SA's leading short-term insurer that offers a range of cover options, from vehicle to building and home contents, even she didn't overthink it. The kind of freedom Santam gives you takes some getting used to. Speak to your broker. Santam, this is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
Did you know that every time you swipe your benefit card, you're contributing towards the Dis-Chem Foundation? Each time you swipe, not only are you rewarded, but a percentage of your purchase is donated to the Dis-Chem Foundation to support communities in need. All the more reason to sign up for your Dis-Chem or Dis-Chem Baby City benefit card today. Support with every swipe. The Dis-Chem Foundation, caring for their community.
Big dreams, small budget? No problem. With Prime Media Credit, your business can be on 947 702 KFM 94.5 and Cape Talk today and pay later. Flexible finance, maximum impact. Email advertise@primemedia.co.za. Prime Media Credit, powered by Bridgement.
702.
You are listening to The Money Show's best bits.
This week on How I Make My Money, we featured Mandla Sibego, the visionary entrepreneur who transformed Johannesburg's premier art fair into a fully black-owned platform. Now, since acquiring F&B Art Joburg in 2019, Sibego reimagined the fair with a bold new vision, one that elevated African contemporary art while championing inclusivity, equal representation, and cultural integrity. Now, under his leadership, the fair evolved into both a thriving marketplace and a global stage for creative voices from across the continent.
Well, I can't quite recollect when was my first artwork, but what I do remember is in those days, I think I was early in business. I think it was just before 2010. I had been in charge of the look and feel for FIFA, for the FIFA stadiums. It was a long process that had started like 5 years before. And then when I finally had some money after the World Cup, I then wanted to spend it. And one of the things I wanted to do was buy art. So I kind of walked into the F&B Art Joburg Fair. It was called the F&B Art Joburg Fair at the time. And then and I was just so completely dazzled by what I saw, that it was such a very fresh, very contemporary, very edgy. It was the kind of stuff that I saw overseas, but had not seen it here at home. So, and that kind of led me to spending more time with artists and getting to understand what art was about, the little that I could know at the time. And then I bought a couple of pieces. It was mostly prints. And that really did make me very interested to a point where I actually wanted to actively invest in the art ecosystem.
We'll get to the acquisition a bit later, but I want to talk about your formative years as somebody that got into business. Why the interest in capital investments? Why the interest in that part of the sector in terms of doing business?
Well, I think I kind of recognize the importance of the creative sector, and my philosophy has always been to invest in my passions. So I've landed up investing in things that I'm passionate about, and then art is one of those. And then I also liked that it wasn't kind of like your traditional museum, nonprofit kind of approach. That it was a commercial business, that it was actually a business that sells space to galleries, engages with galleries, and brings content to the space. And a lot of people don't quite realize that it is a going business. You do employ people, you do put up this infrastructure, and you do own an infrastructure that you keep that helps you to build quite a big fair once a year.
From outside looking in, and from somebody who's attended some of these art fairs, you can't quite tell where the commercial structure is. It just looks like a lot of artists have come together, put together a lot of their great works, and they've been given a space where they can showcase their work and potentially also get somebody to invest and take it home. But in terms of the commercial viability of this particular investment for you, how does it work? Putting together an art fair and making sure it is profitable.
Yep. Well, it's a year-long process. First and foremost, you need a team of qualified and experienced people who understand the art ecosystem, who speak the language, but also who respect the art ecosystem. So those people you keep the whole year. It varies from a curatorial team to production teams, production management team to marketing teams. And so in essence, in the value chain, you are supporting various people to kind of help you build the fair, including the worker who ultimately comes to the fair to build the wall itself, and to paint and to put up the vinyls. That's another whole process on its own. That's quite an important thing in an art fair. The architectural side, engaging with an architect with a lot of backwards and forth. And then the actual creation of the content itself, which requires you to look for understanding where art content sits at this moment, especially in South Africa and across the continent, because we're a Pan-African fair. So it means that we have to be engaged, sometimes without even being in those cities, and trying to navigate what does Lagos really look like at this point in time. What are the coolest things that we could bring to Joburg? What are the coolest things that are happening in Ethiopia? Many years ago, we helped to launch the first gallery from Addis Ababa in South Africa that has gone international, is now London-based. That gallery is very focused on the European scene, but doesn't come to Joburg. So we now have to look for the next one. So there are various areas, and then there's the side where you ultimately have built your content and now you're selling space, the square meterage. There's a formula around the fair. There's different sizes. We speak about the hub. The hub is the main section of the fair, where these are galleries that are probably players for more than 20 years. A lot of people go to galleries without seeing that these galleries themselves are actually small businesses. Some of them have become international, like at the top. The top ones are multi-million businesses, actually. If you look at the ones that have South African galleries, for that matter, have spaces in London and so on. So there's a lot of various pieces that ultimately come together, and then there's a ticketing side, and then that's where the audiences come in, and by then everything is done. The fair has been built within a schedule that is set aside with perhaps the convention center, where you buy the space from them for a couple of millions, and then you have to pay them, and then you have to find money to make sure that you do pay your bills.
I like how you say a couple of millions. How do you then value the square meterage of a gallery? Is that you curating some of the big names in art, or is it based on foot traffic like it would be at a mall? How does that work?
Well, we place experience. Like, we were an 18-year kind of fair. Internationally, the model is that people pay square meterage. It could be like 5 rand per square meter, depending on the size that you have chosen and that we feel fits you. So you'll never get a gallery that's been around for more than 60 years in the smallest space. So they have to take the bigger space. So then that means that they pay more. And then we've created a new section in the fair, which when we reimagined the fair 5 years ago, we called it Gallery Lab, which is really where we incubate the next future galleries from the continent, because we realize that Joburg and South Africa is quite privileged to have a lot of infrastructure inherited from apartheid in many ways, but the rest of the continent doesn't have what Joburg has. So if you're waiting for that African art ecosystem to build itself, you'll wait a lifetime. So we then thought, let's kind of find a way in which we can shift the sponsorship component, which is the other pillar of the business is sponsorship, is that FNB then pays for naming rights. And these naming rights, we then decided that we will use their fund, the finance from FNB, mostly to cover for the build-up of the fair, but also to support future young gallerists. That's why this year we could have like 14 galleries from, 14 countries, which is quite a lot.
From an events perspective, and I'm trying to come up with a way of explaining it to our listener. You know, from an event perspective, at a concert, you'll have the big names that are coming through, whether it's Amapiano artists or whoever is popular at the time. So your El Anatsuis, your Willem Kentridges, Julie Menretu. Do you list those for private clients that know who you're talking about and what the value might be to attend that fair?
Look, another component of an art fair is what we call the VIP program. And this is where all of those big names sit in. So we run privately a VIP program that is really targeted at people who may have been collecting art for a long time. We know them by name. We know what they like. We work together with the galleries on making sure that group of people has access to our VIP program. And that VIP program gives people into it's smaller gatherings that take place during the fair of inspirational experiences that people would ordinarily not have. But also it could be engagements with artists. And and then what has actually started to happen, Moteo, is that when we went just before the fair, the galleries run on a catalog system. So the catalogs get released. And on those catalogs, that's when you'll pick up which artists are actually going to appear at the fair. It's very important that catalogs go out before the fair because the buyers who buy art at the fair are not only at the fair, they're also outside of the fair. They could be anywhere in the world who are particularly looking for a particular piece. And
so those calls, are they coming through red telephones and people are telling you, this is what I'd like?
Yes, they come through to the galleries themselves directly to saying, I'm ready for this. This is what I want. And thank you so much. Can I see it? Can I send someone to see it? Can I get an advisor to come and have a look at it if it's someone who's maybe here in South Africa and they cannot be there themselves? But collecting art is a passion for most. So you tend to find your chairmen and your CEOs or just individuals who are interested coming in themselves, to look at this work. The physicality part is still critical.
How important is it, though, to still have access to the likes of me who just like to look at art? Because you do know you don't have the deep pockets yet to get, great collectibles from those major artists and big names.
Well, the reimagining of the fair with FNB 5 years ago shifted the focus to people like you now, to saying we need to find ways of growing the next cohort of South Africans who will carry this legacy forward. Because the guys who started these type of things 18 years ago had now retired. If you look at the chairmen and CEOs of First Rand, a lot of them retired as an example, and across different sectors. So it was quite important that we start to look to the future. But at the same time, we bring people who ordinarily would not be interested or didn't know how to engage with art. And lastly, it was so important that as transformation peaks in South Africa, we hope, across the private sector, that you can ultimately have the next cohort of leadership who are not blinded by what's on their walls in those offices or in government roles, because we wanted to find ways of protecting culture and of protecting the future of the art ecosystem. So very much the work that we do when you walk into the fair, there's one side that's completely about education only, which is a talks program, the guided walkabouts, so it's a very warm, vibrant, exciting space that makes you feel proud to be South African.
That was Mandla Sibego on How I Make My Money, the entrepreneur who redefined Johannesburg's art scene by turning F&B Art Joburg into a powerful black-owned platform for African contemporary art.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
In the recent edition of the Investment School feature, listeners were treated to a thought-provoking discussion with Patrick Matidi, Head of Equities at Aluwani Capital Partners, and Gary Boyson, Director at Rand Swiss. Now, the conversation delved into the risks of what they termed the Rand roulette, a common tendency among South African investors to rush into buying US dollars during periods of Rand weakness. So we know how volatile the Rand is. Many then, as investors, tend to shelve their money elsewhere in the world. Is this a good idea? Let's find out.
These days, it is actually pretty easy to move funds offshore. So, of course, you have to obey the rules. So you've got up to your 1 million rand single discretionary allowance, and you can, of course, apply for the authorized international transfer, which is the AIT PIN, and that'll give you another 10 million. And that is a lot easier than it has been in many years. So, we do these kinds of clearances for clients all the time. You need to prove the source of funds. You need to obviously have the documentation in place, or you need to declare 3 years assets and liabilities. But I think SARS reserves around 21 days to get that clearance sorted out, and we've seen them go through in probably 4 or 5 days at the moment. So definitely from an administration point of view, it's actually become quite easy to get them approved. And then it's just a matter of having an international account that can receive the funds, and it's about, I suppose, picking your time on when you want to pull the trigger on the currency and executing. So we do the whole process kind of end to end. So I find it very easy. I think from a client's point of view, maybe if you don't know how to set up an offshore account, or maybe, if you're not sure whether you should be doing this through a bank or a currency, what they call a treasury outsourcing client, so TOC, then it can maybe be a little bit tricky, but really the process is actually pretty simple.
What kind of client should be looking at this option? Because I'm thinking about the deep pockets that you might likely have to move your money offshore. But what kind of client asks you or requests this type of investing?
I don't think it's not really a matter of the value. And there's many services that can do very small amounts and still build an offshore portfolio for you and correctly
externalize it. So you don't have to be well into the millions.
No, not at all. No. Like I said, it's actually much easier if you're under $1 million, because then you can use the single discretionary allowance. So it's really, like I said, I think the type of person that should be looking at this is, you should look at it in the context of your overall investment strategy and your overall portfolio. So I think it's always difficult to say when should you do it and who should do it, but really, if you have 100% of your money domestically and you work domestically and you're in South Africa, your house is in South Africa, everything to do with your wealth is in South Africa, for me then it makes sense to take a portion of your capital and move it offshore, because you can diversify. There's just investment options that just aren't available in the local market. You can access things like Tesla and exciting stocks. I think Intel is up. Intel, I think, is up 30% today. So you've got a much wider universe. But at the same time, if you live in South Africa, you are just incredibly pessimistic and you've moved 98% of your money offshore and you have no emergency funds in South Africa, you should probably start thinking about building up a reserve in South Africa as well, because it's something that you are going to adopt, that currency volatility. If the currency blows out, or like we have now with the South African Reserve Bank suddenly deciding that we're not getting an interest rate cut, and you see the currency strengthening, and suddenly you have an immediate call on your money. You need to buy a house, or you need to, you've got an emergency medical bill, but suddenly all of your assets are international. That's also not smart. Then I would say you probably need to be moving money back. So it really comes down to the client. I think all clients should have some element diversified, but there's no golden number on saying you should have 50-50 or that. It really comes down to the client situation.
Patrick, I'm quite the patriot when it comes to the South African Rand. I'm always rooting for it, even though it doesn't always turn out too good. But for somebody who's looking to move the rand elsewhere in the world, what are those key markets where it's more successful to move our currency, giving its volatility and sometimes weakness against more stronger currencies?
Yeah, good evening, Mateo. Thanks for having me. I think it comes down to, the end objective. So what are you trying to achieve? And therefore, with that objective in mind, it kind of then leads you, to the best place where you feel that objective can be met, from an investment point of view as a start. But I think also, to your earlier question around the purposes and the type of clients, I think the other element that one should consider is, especially if one is a traveler, if you're lucky enough to be, traveling frequently offshore, whether for leisure or for business, it may be an idea to have, some foreign currency put aside, to try and smooth out the volatility. But to come back to your question, and I think it really comes down to what are you trying to achieve? And therefore, with that in mind, what's the best destination to kind of achieve that goal? And then the destination will then point to the currency. So, for example, if you're trying to invest and diversify, and then maybe you are not finding great opportunities, let's say out of the US market, because that is expensive, Nvidia, Tesla, whatever PEs there may be, but you're finding better opportunities, let's say in Asia. Right, then to access the Asian market, you may need to then convert your rand to yen, given again, where you are finding those opportunities and how you can best access them. But ultimately, as I keep saying, where you want to be invested will dictate the currency in terms of how to be invested.
When we decide then as investors to move some of our currency elsewhere in the world, what kind of research are we doing before we even pull the trigger of moving the money and getting the forms ready? But what kind of research are we doing to make sure we also safeguard ourselves? I'm sure you can tell I'm quite conservative with moving money. Patrick?
So I think, again, the research that you need to do is, if you're diversifying purely for diversification purposes and away from, let's say, the local currency, the processes that was highlighted earlier, I think that is key in terms of the admin, just making sure that you've got the right setup and you are on good terms with the regulation. And then obviously on the other end, you need to make sure that you're investing in markets that are highly regulated, and therefore, and again, the propensity to lose your money, to scams and all that kind of stuff, gets eliminated. And then you need to look at the investable universe. So what are you trying to achieve? What opportunities you're looking for that are not already available in South Africa? So, for example, if you're looking at investing in equities, but you do not want, commodities, you want, let's say, I don't know, some thematic, type of products that is not readily available in SA, then you need to understand that, understand it properly, make sure that, you know what the drivers are, the return expectations, in local currency. And you need to have some sense of, over that investment horizon, what do you think the rand will do? Because a big chunk of your expected return profile, being a rand investor, is both the currency movement and the underlying investment in terms of, if you invested in yen, for example, what are the yen returns and what is that likely to do in rand terms, once you consolidate and bring in the currency into the equation. So all of that still points to understanding what you're investing in, what are the key drivers, what is the purpose of your investment? Is it to diversify? Is it to grow capital? Are you trying to shy away from inflation? Or is it purely a currency play? Where again, you don't have to then go and buy equities or bonds, but you can actually sit, in cash. You can buy Swiss francs, for example, and just sit in that cash, and then that exchange rate against the rand, if you feel that the rand will weaken, can be the main source of your returns going forward.
Then, Gary, let's get into what's allowed and what's not allowed when you're moving your money. A single discretionary allowance, foreign investment allowance. What are the differences there?
Yeah, so the single discretionary allowance, that runs on the calendar year. So that's 1st of January to the 31st of December, and you can take out, essentially 1 million, and you can do it in tranches. And to your earlier question about how do you time this, how do you make the experience a little bit safer, you can, it's cumulative over the year. So following like almost a rand cost averaging strategy, if you're nervous that I'm going to buy this at the worst period and I'm going to lose money, you can do it in tranches. You can do 250, 250, 250, 100, 100, 100, whatever you want. But that allowance essentially runs for the calendar year, and then it'll reset again. So you have 1 million rand every calendar year to take out. With the AIT PIN, so that's your 10 million rand allowance, that is from the date of approval. So if you do obviously your application through SARS, and you get approved, let's say 18th of September, you will have until the 18th of September 2026 to move out your 10 million. And it can also be done in parts. It's really not an issue. Now, if you want to go above the 10 million, you can do special reserve bank approval. There are other mechanisms to transfer money out as well. So for example, now what we're seeing is there's also trust-to-trust distribution. So if you have a South African company that's held by a South African trust, for example, that trust can actually nominate an international trust as a beneficiary, and you'll be able to make a distribution internationally without limits. So there's lots of nuances to this as well. Another thing that I suppose listeners might not be aware of, that there's also a funds in, funds out rule. So if you have got an investment overseas, let's say you've taken R1 million out or 2 million rand out, and this year you have a call, you need to use the money in South Africa, and you bring 2 million rand back in. That actually that tops up your allowance. So now you actually can take 3 million out for this calendar year because you've brought money in. You can first kind of get that.
That was Gary Boyson and Patrick Matidi offering a sobering look at the risks of chasing currency movements and the importance of building a disciplined offshore investment strategy. While you've been listening to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of just some of the best interviews from the show this week. If you'd like to hear more, go to our website or your favorite podcast app and search for The Money Show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on The Money Show, 6 p.m. on Monday. Have a good weekend.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
This is EWN.
Good evening, I'm Martin Slabbert. Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau has again met with US trade officials amid continued efforts to strike a sweet trade deal with Washington. Tau met with United States Trade Representative Ambassador Jamison Greer